Okay, Laura and I are here today to share with you guys, well, actually, to use some of your questions to answer, to get to know each of us a little bit better. And so we are going, I'm going to ask her the questions, and then she gets to turn right around and ask me questions. She wants to do the same one even. So here we go. It was been so cool. I don't know about you, Laura, but we've had this friendship for a really long time, and getting to see each other in person at Biltmore a couple of weeks ago was just icing on the cake, but it really didn't, I mean, it didn't deepen the friendship we already have, because it just felt like, oh, I get to see her this time. And
it's like sisters. We don't see each other for these long periods of time, and then we're thrown together, at writing conferences or the Biltmore or whatever. I mean, and then it's like we just pick right back up. It's like no time has passed. So my Appalachian sister, I call her.
It's right. You need one. I'm just saying.
I don't have a sister, but I'm writing about a sister. So that's quite interesting.
Ooh, we'll have to learn more about that in a little bit.
Yes,
but anyway.
Pepper was my template.
Oh no.
No, telling what might happen. It releases in January. No. Okay.
So great.
Back to business.
Okay, so we have a question from Susan Snodgrass. Hey, Susan. That is, how do you come up with ideas for your books?
And I'm on first, huh?
Well, I can go first if you want me to.
You go first, because I'm waking up here.
Okay. Right. So just in case you guys don't know, I'm Eastern time, which is, I live in North Carolina, so I'm Eastern time. Laura is over, where are you, Laura?
Siberia, Washington State. When I can't dart home, I'm out west. So here I am.
She's far west, like Washington State is far.
Like so anyway. Olympic National Park at the Gateway, actually. Yes.
Wow. Okay. So how do I come up with my ideas? Now, it's interesting for me. I don't know how it'll be for Laura. It'll be really interesting for me to hear her answer. But every book has a different way that they seem to come to me. So I've had books come to me where stories come to me while I've been washing dishes, and all of a sudden a character will pop into my head, and it's not related to anything. And I'll just see this character, and I'm like, who are you? And that will start the story. I've had story ideas come to me when I've been reading a news article, and something within the article will be like, oh, well, that would be an interesting story to write if this happened. And so that can spark a movie. If I've watched a movie before and there's something within a movie that's kind of like, I would have liked it better if it had done blank, and that'll inspire a story. Or like with the Mistletoe Countess that just came out in September, the story sparked while I was walking through Biltmore, and I was on the floor where the bedrooms were, and I saw the secret stairs that goes down into the library, and I thought, what kind of guest at Biltmore would want to stay right beside the library stairs in the house? And that immediately inspired the creation of Grace. So I think for me, it's a lot of different kinds of things, and I really feel like that God just kind of uses my imagination to inspire the ones he wants me to pursue, the story ideas he wants me to pursue. So for me, that seems to be it's pretty random for me. So I'm curious, Laura, if yours is any different.
It's so interesting, because I think as each book we write is unique, how the book came to be is unique. It always, for me, follows a fascination, and it always stems from something in history that I just can't let go. My debut novel, which seems eons ago, 2009, The Frontiersman's Daughter, I'd grown up in Kentucky, and I had always had this lifelong fascination with Daniel Boone, and I wasn't raised with a father, so I'd always wondered what it would be like. It said he had a favorite daughter, Jemima Boone, and I thought, what would it have been like to be Jemima Boone and have such a famous father? But only he wasn't famous then. He was only famous later, after his death, pretty much. So that, what would it have been like to have been Boone's daughter? He had many of them. Jemima was said to be his favorite. So that started that book, and my whole love of Appalachia in my home state just inspired the 10 years it took to write it, mostly because of the research involved. It was a book about wildcrafting. I had to know what was in the woods, what they would have used back 250 years ago. But I read something interesting recently regarding writers and inspiration, and it says most of their ideas come on when they're exercising or when they're in the shower.
Yes.
But like Pepper, like you're gonna grab a waterproof whatever. No. And I found that I don't know about Pepper, but if you don't write it down, our sentences come to me out of nowhere, and characters out of nowhere, like at the kitchen sink. And and even scraps of dialogue. So if you delay and you don't, in the middle of the night, it often happens. I wake up and there's something there and it needs to be on paper, and I do everything longhand usually because I'm a boomer. But anyway, if you don't write it down, it's gone. It is gone, and you can try to resurrect it. Sorry, get up, turn the shower off, write it down, stop exercising, run to your paper and pen or phone or whatever. Anyway, my 2 cents.
No, it does, and it disappears. I mean, I have napkins where I've written pieces of dialogue, or I'm thankful for phones, because now I'll audio text into my phone something if I'm in a place where I don't have the paper.
Oh.
That's been amazing.
I need to do more of that. I've written it on the back of restaurant receipts, grocery bills, standing in the aisle of the Safeway. Here I go, writing down dialogue.
Yes.
I mean, people will probably think I'm nuts, but anyway, the creative mind is fascinating. It's truly a gift from God. And every writer, there's some similarities, but God is so unique with us that our inspiration stories are also very unique, I think.
Right. And he wants to use those stories very specifically through us. I don't know about you, but for me, when I am comforted and convicted and learn through each of my stories, God uses them for my heart first, I think, before it ever gets to other readers.
I'm so glad you said that. I just wrote, in fact, a very personal look at A Heart Adrift for a magazine, and my publicist, I think she was in tears, and she says, after she read it, she says, I think this is really going to touch the hearts of readers, because I thought, wow. And it's like Pepper said, when you finish a book, sometimes you don't know what that book says. You don't know how it's going to reach the reader, but most importantly, it's not till I finish a story that I learn that God is using it to teach me, the author, something. And it's often a spiritual lesson. And in A Heart Adrift, which releases in January, it's the biggest spiritual lesson to date. So I'll try to share that on my author page, the moving article that my publicist talked about. So
that's great.
Anyway.
And I think that's good for all of you guys to hear, that as a Christian author, and as Christian authors that we are, God is using our words for us too. And I know that with what's happened with my life this year, with the loss of my brother, I had no idea I was going to be, I started 2 books in March that were both about sibling loss, and my brother dies in May. And I had already started those stories with no thought that I was going to lose my brother and my only sibling, right? And so it's been an amazing thing to kind of process how, even in what we're writing as stories, God's using those within Laura and my bigger life stories to change our hearts and teach us how to grow and forgive and love and heal and all those things.
Do you think, Pepper, that story, I don't think anything prepares you for a loss, but can you look back and see that, how do you think the Lord used that up to your brother's death with those 2 stories? Did it not prepare you, but did it give you maybe more of a testimony, perhaps?
I think 2 things out of that. I think one thing was that it made me think, Lord, you were You were preparing me, right? But why would I write two stories with the same theme there as far as sibling loss? And then the second thing I thought was, you do. I mean, you know as well as I, we get into the characters and we're trying to feel their feelings so we can write about them. So I was going through, how would my heroine feel about losing her sister? Because in that story, she had lost her sister. And I'm like, what would that make her feel? What would healthy healing look like? And what would unhealthy healing look like?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And so I was trying to work through that. And so I'd already kind of started thinking things like that before this happened. And as a caveat, I mean, we almost lost my brother 4 years ago to a car accident. And so I'd had that previous emotion of what if he dies, right?
Right.
And so God blessed us with 4 more years of his life, so we could have that with him when we could have lost him 4 years ago. But yeah, it was amazing to think, number one, God was so kind to help my heart get ready in some kind of strange way that hasn't happened, you know. And then also, now when I go back to finish one of the books is finished. It came out in the novella collection, Christmas in Mistletoe Square. But the other one is my Isle of Mull book. And I've still got to write that at some point. I've gotten the first part of it written, but.
And you'll be writing that in a different stage of your grief.
Yeah.
Which will just enrich the story, I think.
And for both of the characters, and the hero and the heroine both lost siblings. And so they're both years out from their loss.
Ties them together. Okay.
Yeah, that is what ties them together. I know, it's a weird.
Oh.
Okay, sorry. Next question.
Oh, I love it.
Susan had a twofold question, and her second part, which was convicting to me, so I'm going to let you answer this one first, was, how big a part does prayer play in your work?
Oh, well, you know, it's interesting because sometimes you just feel this mad dash to get to the keyboard or your paper, whatever. But a lot of times, especially in the editing phase, I do pray before I even touch the keyboard, because, you know, the story is on, you know, in Microsoft Word at that point, and it's staring at me 400 pages. And it's overwhelming, really. I mean, you've written all this stuff, especially the first draft, it's like taking a bucket of paint and throwing it at the screen, and it's all out there, and then you have to clean it up, you know, with this little brush, and it requires a lot of prayer, because you don't know what the Lord is teaching you, and you don't know. I always say, Lord, help me craft a story, you know, that just has you at the forefront. Even though Publishers Weekly has said my stories are spiritually subtle, what does that mean? You know, I can't, it's organic. Can you imagine writing a story, Pepper, that didn't have Christ at the center?
Well, our worldviews are Christian worldviews. I don't think we can write something without that being an undergirding what we're doing.
Exactly.
Even if it's not overt, it's still our worldview. So we're portraying that in what we write.
Talk about a firm foundation. I don't know how other novelists do it that aren't grounded in Christ. I mean, obviously do it, and then you have these these unchristian novels that sell like gangsters. But anyway, I don't always pray, but I think we're in an attitude of prayer as we write. We recognize that the gift comes from God. I could never work it up. Pepper can teach how to write. I can't teach how to write. It's definitely a gift. I've had it since I was 7 years old. I knew it was unique and special. You know, I can hear the words musically in my head. That's another novel. But you know, you just recognize that it's a gift that you've been entrusted with, and you just have an attitude of prayer that you want to be a good steward of it for the time it's been given. And that window is short. I mean, I look at Pepper's younger than me. I look at novelists who are even younger than Pepper, and I'm like, wow, you know, I'm here for just a short time. My window is short. There's all these up and coming novelists, but I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And so I want my work to be saturated in Christ. But I know my motives aren't always pure. I'm learning. My novels are for me as much as for you. So.
Well, and them being for me as much as for the readers is not bad either, because I think, like, my husband is a preacher, and he says that when he's preparing a sermon, God's preaching it to him before he ever preaches it to the congregation, because what a great way for that to come out to the congregation after he's felt the power of the sermon, right?
And been convicted and changed and transformed and challenged.
Right. And I think that can be true for you and me in our writing, is that, we're living through the stories when we write them. We have to write deep characters. You have to be the character, and to feel those feelings and explain those emotions and make it organic in that kind of way. And like we were talking about earlier, I think God uses that. So when you talk about an attitude of prayer while we're writing, I think there really is something in that aspect of God using our words back at us to refine us, but also he knows exactly who's going to need them when they read the book, even if it's subtle. And so I know for me, I need to pray more besides the "help me, Lord, get words on a page" prayer. Besides that one.
We need a lot more.
That's right. So I know that particularly related to prayer, particularly related to writing, I don't know that I prayed all the time, particularly related to writing. I have morning devotions in the morning, of course. And I think I just pray generally that I'll glorify God in what I do, whether that's my day job as a speech pathologist or writing. But I know there are times specifically when I'm thinking, just how I create a book is that I'm looking at my two main characters and I'm like, what is God trying to teach you in this story? That's my first question. And that attitude in my mind is already going, okay, Lord, I need your help to know what you're trying to teach this character. Even though they're fictional, they're representing realistic emotions and struggles and all those things that somebody in this time period is going to read and go, right. Oh, I know what that feels like,
And you have to be open to the story taking a 360-degree turn. My publisher is pretty good about not requiring me to do a real detailed synopsis, thankfully, because the finished product is not going to look like what I turned in this hoped for novel, 2 years prior or whatever. It's going to be totally different. So it's almost like Ravel senses this is a waste of time for her and for us. You just, give us the gist and then you run with it. And thank the Lord, he never fails us. He never fails us. The book gets done. It reaches the readers it's intended to reach, and it's just it's a mysterious process from start to finish. And I'm just thankful that I have the gift. I think I have a gift.
You definitely have a gift.
I wonder if
you definitely have the gift. And we'll talk about how I know you definitely have the gift as being a big fangirl of yours early on. That's how we became friends.
And now I'm a fangirl of Peppers.
Oh yeah.
I have been for years.
Okay, so next question is from Anne Heron, and she says, for the books that are part of a series, I have two questions. One, do you know when you first start writing the story that there will be a series? And two, were your series written in chronological order? Okay, you want me to start with that one?
You better, because I only have one series and I'll never do another series. I'm your standalone gal.
So Laura and I are going to have different answers than Anne, because I only think in series. And Laura only thinks mostly in standalone. So we're really
that's
different.
Fascinating.
It is. I think in series. Every time I write a book, I think in series. So planning them, though, is a little interesting, because I don't know that I necessarily plan out the books 2 or 3 when I'm working on book 1. I'll just know, oh, that person needs their own story. that person needs their own story. That doesn't mean I know what their stories are at the time when writing book one, but I know when I meet that character that's a secondary character, I know they're going to be in a story.
I
In the
have to put
future.
this in. Pepper is amazing. She literally is one of the most creative minds I've ever met. I'm not exaggerating. She will like text me or do something and let me know that she has this idea. Well, then the next text and the next text is the second and third books of that idea. And this character we met, I mean, we're talking about years down the road. And she hasn't even written this book. And I'm like, what in the world? How does this girl, I mean, she like hopscotches. I mean, you are amazing, and I am not exaggerating. I cannot do that.
You're very sweet. So I guess I'm going to be the one answering this question. It sounds like but again, I think we both have our unique talents because your historical research is so detailed and interwoven, and our styles are really interestingly different because I don't do a lot of deep historical details in my books. I'm a generalist. And so it comes across, I'm into the story. Let's get through the story. Right. And so that's what I see. And then I read yours and you have all of this creative detail and these things that I love reading, but I don't want to write. And so it's wonderful that you have the mind for that, because my mind is like, okay, when are we going to get into the kissing scene?
Well, I need more like hurry up and get to the kiss. I just read a review, and I normally don't read my reviews, but it made me laugh out loud. She gave me a 5-star review, and like I said, I normally don't read my reviews, but I happened to be on Amazon, and it was just there. And she said, I love this book, but I do wish France would get to the point early on. And I got so tickled because I don't get to the point early on. She said, if only France would get to the point early on, but it's that slow burn where Pepper, there's no slow burn to Pepper. It's hot.
I'm just saying, the book I'm writing right now has a slower burn because I'm on chapter like 16 and nobody's been kissing yet. And I'm sitting here going, what is wrong with me?
That should come with a warning. This is right. Not Pepper approved.
Actually, there are some nice little tensions in there, but not kissing yet. So
your kisses are fun too.
I love writing them. And where my series is written in chronological order, I'm trying to think of my series is, most of them are written in chronological order, but that doesn't mean they come to my brain in chronological order. But because most of the time I'll write a book one and know which characters are going to have another story, and I need to figure out historically, if they're historical, if there's a historical event that's going to be a good match for those characters, I'll switch the characters to what I need them to be to match that historical event, so I can pull that historical event into the story of those characters' lives. So, but I think most of the ones I've written have been chronological, even though I knew about them maybe out of sequence. I've written them all chronologically. I would say you had to write your series chronologically for the way yours flowed, Laura.
Well, mine was a challenge, The Valentine Legacy. Some of you read it, because there were originally 4 books in that series, and it was the time in the market when Revell thought there needs to be a big family saga, kind of like, I don't know. But so I had to leap. I had to write through 3 generations, and I had to age my hero from like 20 to like 90 years old, and I had to leap into the 19th century, which is like, I don't really care for the 19th century. I find it, well, that's another story, but I just am not interested in the 19th century. Anything before the 18th, I'm just absolutely rabid about. But so I had to set 2 books in the 19th century. And so I struggled. I think they're good stories, solid, because the Lord didn't disappoint me there. He carried it to completion and enabled me to do it. But I just, it was a challenge. You have passion. There has to be some passion there.
Oh, agreed completely. I think the stories, I'm sure you'll say the same thing, but I think we write faster and better, in my opinion, when we have a passion for what we're writing. And there have been, I think there have been a couple of stories I've written that I've written because I had the contract to write them. And it wasn't that I didn't like them at all. It's just that there was another one over here that I'd rather be writing.
Right, exactly. And I had my editor, and who is the best editor in the world. She actually wrote to me on the third story and said she had read some of it and said, this just isn't Laura. And I'm like, wow, you know, she knew I was struggling with that third book because I was in 1850, 1860. And I'm like, oh, yawn, you know, but I went back and I redid some stuff and got it done. But you do have to have a passion for your subject. And I think they realized, you know, I realized I can't do series aren't my game. And so Revell is now, they call me a standalone author. So,
which
but I'm
works
thrilled
for you.
the lessons, yes, works better for me than a series author. And that's very unusual. Usually series sell better and do better for authors, but I'm the anomaly. But it gave me a lot of good experience, that series, and how it's a totally different experience writing a series than a standalone. Standalone is short, sweet, sort of, and then you
yours are never short, Laura.
No. No, write a novella, you know, with my first sentence, but it's different. You know, I think everybody should write a series because it teaches you some amazing things. Maybe makes you a better writer in the end.
Well, I wrote Between Stairs, not Between Stairs and Stardust. I wrote Hope Between the Pages, and I was certain it was my one standalone, you know, and I already have a sequel in my head waiting, and I can't. It's like I can't not write characters that need more story.
Well, I love that because that means you care enough about your secondary characters to do that. You know, that you have a passion for them that can propel another story.
Yeah, it's probably just a novella sequel because I don't know it's enough to be a novel, but I would say Hope Between the Pages is my first novel that I wrote with standalone in mind. And I enjoyed writing it, but it was unique in the fact that it was as a split time for the first time, and I wasn't thinking ahead. And I'm always thinking ahead on what's going to happen in the next book when I'm working with characters, because you want to set it up in previous books so it's not a surprise in case you do write a third book, right? Or you do write a fourth book. People already have an introduction to some of the things that you're going to introduce in your fourth book through verse 1, 2, and 3 or whatever. And
it has to be pretty seamless, you would hope.
Yeah. Okay, all right, sorry. We went on that one. Let's see. Another question by
Digress.
Anne. Yeah, we can. We do that.
Thank you for these great questions.
I know, right? I'm trying to make sure we got good time so far. The next question from Anne is, how do you come up with character names? I'm going to let you take that one to start.
Oh, wow. You know, I am wild about authentic names. You know, there's nothing like reading an historical in 18th century and the heroine's name is Destiny or something. It's just, sorry, folks, it's not done. So you go to the source, you go to census records, you go to ship's manifest, you know, you go to real living people. The other day for the Scottish novel, I needed a servant's name. So I went into Scotland has amazing resources. I went in, found this obscure Scottish roll census of all the servants in Berwickshire, Scotland, for this time period, and their names, their ages, who they were in service to, how many servants were in that household. And so I literally got to cherry pick the name of the servant who was a servant. So I try to get, you know, as close, even though it's fiction, to as close to fact as possible. And once I have to have a name before I put a word on the page. I can't operate. It's probably like you want to name your baby soon after birth. Is that the right analogy, or maybe it's going to backfire?
No, I think that's a good one. Yeah. it gives that person,
Yeah, I
it
mean, you
gives it
have,
a person. It's a person then.
yes. And it helps if I love the name. You won't find many Georges in my book. As much I'm a wild about George Washington, George Rogers Clark, and King George III, but you won't find that common a name in my novels, but they will be historically correct, period appropriate. So
Same thing for period appropriate most of the time. I will look up names from the time period to make sure I fit it, or I will look through family history if I'm writing in Appalachia during certain times, because there were very unique names in Appalachia that like were not probably era appropriate if you were looking for early 20th century names. Like the name Isom, people have asked me about that name all the time. And I'm like, well, that was my great grandfather's name. So
it's a beautiful name.
Right.
And there are a lot of double names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't know from Kentucky, but in my part of Appalachia, I didn't hear as many double names. More of the double names came in the South, the deeper South. And so in my part of Appalachia, they were just sometimes unusual or biblical, or pronounced the way they were spelled, the way they were pronounced when they were supposed to be spelled another way, but they were pronounced a certain way. So it switched the way the name, like I have a great aunt whose name's Edna, but I never knew her name was Edna because her name was always pronounced Edner. So I thought her name was Edner. And so whenever I finally saw, when I went to, after she passed and we see the gravestone, it's spelled Edna. I'm like, oh, Edna.
Well, that's it. And you probably as a speech pathologist know there's that Appalachian rule with the R. This is not an aunt, but we have a dog named Willow, and she's from Kentucky, and we call her Willer. Willer. It follows that same, I said, that's that Kentucky thing. She's not Willow, she's Willer.
Well,
and that's just the way.
My heroine, I have a character. I know.
it.
I have a character in this book whose name is Willow, and there's you'll love this. There's this whole scene where the British heroine thinks her name is Willa, because everybody keeps calling her Willa, and then the hero brings her willow bark to use for medicine, because willow bark has aspirin in it, has the same ingredients as aspirin in it, and she looks at the bark and she says, "What kind of bark is this?" And he says, "Willow bark." And she goes, "Wait, is her name Willow?" Although she's been calling her Willa. It was actually funny to write, especially for a speech.
That's a hoot.
Yeah. I think for contemporary characters' names, lots of times my names will have historical significance in the family, like a passed down name in the modern, or it has to fit my character. And I think you've said this too, Laura, whenever, either historically or contemporary, I need a name that will fit that character. And Joy Tiffany, who is one of my very early readers, and she will laugh at me because I will start with one name for a character, and then I'll message her and say, nope, the character does not like that name. I've got to change it. That's not fitting. It's not working.
I know that is definitely true. And sometimes your editor, like in the case of was it An Uncommon Woman, I had a different hero name, and my editor was like, no. I had to go back and rename the hero, and I'm glad I did, but I still like the other name. But she was like, yeah.
But isn't that interesting? I mean, it really does have to match. It took me, like, the book that's coming up with Thomas Nelson in November. I started that character with a different name, and I was like, no, that's not right. I mean, I started the first page and I was like, it's not working. And so then I would like do another one and like, no,
right.
That's right. And it's contemporary, so I could really choose whatever. But I was like, the heroine's not working with that. Yes.
And we have to obey. If they don't like the name, out it goes.
And you don't. I think for me, it plugs my writing until I get the name right. I I can't
You
do
don't
the
really know
stories
who
well.
you're writing unless you have the right name.
We are so
And
weird as writers.
oh, we are. No wonder people roll their eyes.
Okay, so I think we could stop our first session here and plan to do a second interview so people can if we can answer the rest of these questions, because there's still a few more. And of course, like you and I both said, we kind of can go long with any question.
Yeah, I know. And bathroom break.
Yeah, we'll do a bathroom break and then we'll do a second interview, and so people can come back and watch the second one when it comes out. How does that sound to you, Laura?
Perfect. Great questions. Yeah, we could just, the danger is we could talk about this for days.
It's right. We should do maybe we can keep talking about this after we do the first two. People might be interested in hearing more about writing and what we read and what we like to read.
Yes, sounds great.
All right. We'll see you guys in just a little bit.